Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be bringing you a book haul. Surprise, surprise, I acquired more books. I'm going to be talking about all non-fiction books today. The secondhand shops that I go to on the regular have blessed me recently with a wealth of non-fiction. Some books that I've been wanting to get to for a really long time, but also some books that weren't even on my radar before I saw them on the shelf. And they are all in some way related to gender, sexuality, intersectional, feminism, that kind of thing. I'm not going to go in any particular order, just the order that I have picked them off my shelves. Without further ado, let's get into the books. So I have turned on Science, Sex and Robots by Kate Devlin. I have this weirdly niche knowledge about sex robots. I have read, I'm not going to say loads, but I'm going to say more than the average person has about sex robots, and this all stemmed from when I did a writing, sci-fi and fantasy module as part of my creative writing degree in my third year of uni, and I didn't really read much science fiction or fantasy at all, but I was into the kind of like Black Mirror-esque kind of science fiction, and I was like, okay, what is it that I know loads about so I can bring that knowledge to the table when I'm writing a science fiction story? And I was like, I know a lot about sex and the sex industry, so that is what I combined for my story, and I wrote a story about sex robots. So I did a lot of research for writing that story, and even years later it's a topic that kind of continues to fascinate me. So when I saw this book, it wasn't one that I had read about this topic before. I knew that I needed to add it to my collection. I also bought a copy of Keep the Receipts, which is written by a trio of women who are the voices behind the podcast of the same name. I don't listen to this podcast kind of consistently, but it's one that I've dipped in and out of over time, and I've really enjoyed it when I've listened to it. It has that kind of like a big sister agony aunt kind of vibe to it, and I'm expecting the same kind of energy from this book, just kind of like general life advice, navigating the world as a woman. I'm expecting it to be really candid, really honest, and hilariously funny as well. I also picked up a copy of Give Birth Like a Feminist by Millie Hill. Now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to pick this one up or not because I know there are some people who very firmly know that they want children, and there are some people who very firmly know that they don't want children, and I sit in neither of those kind of binaries. I don't know. And I do also have a big question mark around books like this. I have read a lot of books about kind of your menstrual cycle and how you can harness that for like the best possible outcome, how to use your menstrual cycle to your advantage. And I found with those books, there's actually just like a lot of pressure put on people who menstruate. Like if you're not having a feminist period, then you're like failing at being a feminist. And I don't want to have the same kind of vibe with this book, but I don't think that's what it's going to be. I just have some question marks around it, and I think it will be an interesting read nonetheless. Even if I decide, nope, I don't want to have children, I think it will be interesting to read. And you know, if I do decide one day that I would like to have children, I'm gonna have a lot of the stuff that I've read from this book underpinning that decision. In a similar vein, I also have a copy of I Am Not Your Baby Mother by Candice Braithwaite. This is a book about pregnancy and motherhood, but particularly from the perspective of a Black woman and how that experience differs from my experience as a white woman would be. I've heard about a lot of the stats from the finding of this book, for instance, that Black women are more likely to die in childbirth than white women are, and I would love to read the full book so I can get a more full understanding of that statistic. I think it's something that's really important to read about on a societal being a good Black ally level, but also in terms of, you know, being a better friend to my Black friends as they begin to grow their families. So definitely going to be an informative one. Okay, this one's a bit weird. This is definitely one of the books that I hadn't heard of before I found it in an Oxfam bookshop. It is Sex After Fascism, Memory and Morality in 20th Century Germany by Dagmar Herzog. So this is published by Princeton University Press. It is like an academic textbook. And you know, it's what it says in the tin. It is about memory and morality in 20th century Germany. It's about sex after fascism. Do I know what Nazi sexual politics was? No, and I do want to find out, to be honest. I was really into history at school, and I basically like made the decision when I went to university, do I want to carry on with English or do I want to carry on with history? And I think if I carried on with history, this is the kind of stuff that I would have been interested in researching. So here we are. I don't know when exactly I'm going to get around to reading this, but I just couldn't let this title not become part of my bookshelf. I needed to buy. If you know your books about sex, this one is no surprise to you. You'll have definitely heard of this book, and that is Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. This is a book about the science behind our sex lives. It's about debunking a lot of the myths behind female sexuality and really looks into the science behind what makes us tick, what gets us off. I find it entirely shocking that I've not read this book yet, so I am so excited to find out what it's going to teach me about my own sexuality. Next, I have a copy of Too Fat, Too Slutty, Too Loud by Anne Helen Peterson. This is a book about the kinds of women that push the boundaries on what is deemed acceptable by society. It is about the women that are described as too something. So like the title suggests, too fat, too slutty, too loud, but a number of other things could follow that. In this book, the author examines this through the lens of 11 different pop culture figures. And looking at some of the names she's included here, I'm not sure I'm going to agree with everything she's suggesting in this book, but I think, you know, sometimes it's good to have a book like that where you don't agree with everything. You're engaging with it in a kind of critical way. So I think that's kind of the experience that I'm going to have with this book. But I'll report back after I've read it. Next, I have Amazing Disgrace by Grace Campbell. Love that because her name's Grace and it's like disgrace. Love it. This is a book about young women living without shame. So whether that is shame about sex, shame about rejection, shame about their mental health. I don't know too much about this book other than that. I do think it's going to be slightly like Feminism 101. Like, I'm not sure this is one of those books that I'm going to learn a lot from. It might be one of those that I just kind of read and nod along with. I'm not sure yet. But I do love reading books about this kind of topic, and I do want to read as many of the books as I can about this kind of topic because it's something that I want to be not necessarily an expert in, but you know, it's something that I do want to have a real breadth of knowledge with. So we'll see how this one stacks up against the other books I've read around this kind of topic. Next, I have Women in Power by Mary Beard. This is a very slim little book from one of Britain's best known classicists, Mary Beard, and she is exploring how history has treated powerful women. So she's looking at these female figures from antiquity all the way up to the modern day, how they've faced judgment and misogyny, and how power structures are constructed to favour men. As I said, it is a really slim little one, so it's one that I will read very quickly, I hope. These final three aren't necessarily like about sexuality as much, but they certainly have kind of feminist angles to them. So I have Notes to Self by Emily Pine. Over the years, lots of people have read this for the Irish Readathon, so it's been one that has been on my radar for quite a number of years now, and I've never got around to reading it despite it having glowing recommendations from everyone. It's meant to be a really emotional, hard-hitting book. It is a collection of 6 essays where the author talks about lots of different topics. So she talks about her alcoholic father, her parents' separation, her teenage years. She talks about infertility and sexual violence. It's both memoir and psychological exploration, and I love those kinds of things. I love when writers are bringing their own personal stories to the table so that they can talk about wider topics. And as I said, this is one that I've had so many recommendations for, so I'm really excited to get to it. Even though it might make me cry, I think it's very likely it'll make me cry. I also have I Feel Bad About My Neck by Nora Ephron. I have started to dip my toe in Nora Ephron's work over the past few years. I feel like she really passed me by, but it feels like this memoir, is it a memoir? I guess it's a memoir. I'm gonna say it's a collection of musings. This collection of musings by Nora Ephron is one of those books that is kind of just mentioned as like one of those books that you should read as a young woman, and I haven't done that yet, so I'm gonna do that. And finally, I have Jog On by Bella Mackie. Now this isn't necessarily, I guess, a book that has a feminist angle to it, but I think when women talk about exercise, there is naturally a kind of gender imbalance that underpins that experience. And this is a book about how the author used exercise and running to combat the struggles that she was having in life, about her mental health, about her life not feeling like it was on track, about struggling with depression. And when I first started exercising, it was definitely because of a mental health kind of perspective. I was in a really dark place when I got back into exercising, and it was a factor that really helped me get my shit together again. I've never been good at running though. I feel like running is just something I don't have the motivation for. So maybe this book is going to motivate me that like the next step in my exercise journey is to do some running. Maybe. But I have loved other books that I've read about women in exercise, like Eat, Sweat, Play by Anna Kessel, so I'd be interested to hear what this author's perspective on the whole thing is as well. So that is it. They are all the books that I'm going to talk to you about today. If you have any thoughts on any of the books that I've mentioned, do leave me a comment down below. If you want to find out more about them, they will be linked in the description as well as ever. All of my social media is linked down below as well if you want to connect with me elsewhere. And if you want to leave a comment but you don't know what to say, leave me one of my favorite emojis, either the peach, the aubergine, or the little like wet emoji. If you would like to hear me talk about some books in a similar kind of non-fiction genre to these books, quite a while ago I did do a reading vlog where I read books just about vaginas. So I'll leave that linked down below and in the cards if you want to check that out. And if you would like me to do a similar reading vlog, maybe with some of these books or some of the other books that I have about gender and sexuality on my shelves, let me know in the comments as well, because I think that could be a lot of fun. Anyways, that's it from me today. I hope you're doing well, and I will speak to you in my next video.